Om yato vacho nivartante, aprapya manasa saha, ananda brahmana vidvan, nabibeti kutaschineti, om shantihi, shantihi, shantihi. That one from which mind and speech fall back in awe, unable to comprehend or describe it. The one who realizes the bliss of that Brahman destroys doubt and fear forever and for all times. And so it is. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. We welcome you here to SRV Loka, and to what I understand is the 9th class in a series, 3 times 3, with a break in between each 3s, is what I remember, because it was broken by a seminar once, it was broken by a trip to the SRV ashram in Portland, Oregon. And then returning from that, we have had 2 classes over the last 2 Sundays on the subject of mantra and how it destroys karma. Destroys means anything that's welcome in that department, how everything from how karma gets dissolved completely. So one is akarma, as Krishna mentions in the Gita, free of cause and effect, to just attenuating it somewhat in this lifetime so that we can catch our breath in the busy rounds of life, birth, life, and death, that is, and maybe catch a glimpse of that ray of the Atman, which is the indivisible self within us, not the small self, which needs ripening, so as not to confuse people with that word self, but the indivisible, all-pervading self. Atman, we call it in Vedanta. And maybe even neutralizing karma so that it is held in abeyance, like it is seemingly in deep sleep, and sometimes we think maybe at the bardo of death, before the next bardo of rebirth, as the Tibetans tell us, or all the way up to utilizing the positive karmas that we've accrued over time, storing up our fruits in heaven, as Jesus was to mention, and which Holy Mother has told us is good because it stores up some merit credits. I'm not sure exactly how you'd say that in Bengali, but that's how it got translated into English. So that a person who is coming back for another lifetime here in the realms of name and form and time and space can have a chance at bettering life. This is, of course, in the mind of the seers of India, based upon infusing more spirituality into it, which means, to further define it, more peace, more love, more light of consciousness, more intelligence, higher wisdom, and all these good qualities which go missing in people, so much so that they don't even remember what they are, what they're like, causes people not to seek the truth with a capital T anymore, causes them to live a life of suffering and sorrow when joy and elation is just right there within them, like the deer running around looking for that scent on the wind, Sri Ramakrishna said, the musk deer, because musk is in its own navel, so Sri Ramakrishna said that would be a fitting analogy for people looking for everything outside when that Atman that we're mentioning, that aroma of spirituality is right there emanating from within them. From within and beyond within, because in India we do talk about higher dualities, not just pleasure and pain and joy and suffering, but things like outer and inner, and bondage and liberation, and form and formlessness. And that's specifically what this chart we've been studying about for 9 now, or 8, this being the 9th weeks of Sundays, has been about, called Manaha Prana Sambandha, as we show it again here. And I want to jump straight to the chase because this class, anywhere from an hour to an hour and 20 minutes, if we go a little over, this is the completion of this subject. Not that it can be completed, there's so much to say about mantra and about karma, two of the deeper subjects in Vedanta, yoga, Tantra, Buddhism too. So we find out that this chart we've been looking at has been created in such a way that it positions itself, let me find this, positions itself upon this beautiful Sanskrit word of many syllables, Mana Pranaha Sambandha, or how I put it in English as a subtitle, connecting the living prana to the luminous mind. And you can see there, as we have reviewed this many times, from food to strength, to increase of stamina, to mastering your posture, to purifying the senses, and equalizing your breathing, infused with consciousness, leads you to recognition of this life force called prana. Man does not live by bread alone. Probably the reference there is that what comes, the energy that comes from food, not just physical food, but mental food, intellectual food, also shows us the way inward in these blocked channels of thinking that get relegated even in intelligent people just to outer things, just to matter, just to atomic particles, not leaving out the atomic particles, I like to say. I have a chart on that in Footfall's book now that's out with 300 some charts there that you can look at. That's a particularly good one to look at, from atomic to atomic particles. So I'm proposing my own particle theory there on that chart, how we are to look deeper and deeper, even beyond, and particularly beyond the vibrating particle of matter, which has led us nowhere, except maybe to the fact of the realization that all is empty, as it was to be called in Buddhism, shunyata. Father of Yoga used that word too, shunya, in regards to the emptiness of these things to even exist. What to speak of satisfy you when you partake of them inside of objects. But if you partake of them inside of food, that provides a route deeper. So that's where prana needs to awaken. Then we go to purify that prana, control the prana, and raise the prana. And that's a 3-part exercise you do that starts with breathing and proceeds with infusing every breath with meaning, connecting the 3-part breath with, in Vedic pranayama they call it, and tantric pranayama too, with the word AUM, with projection, sustenance, and withdrawal. Then about that time you are with your prana pure, as my teacher told me, do this mantra on your hand, it'll purify the body and the prana, and then you'll start meeting holy company. So you can then go amongst other people of different religions or people of your own walk of life and religion and be accepted, and not only accepted but revered, respected and revered, because this prana is flowing in you, causes this outer sheen, sometimes called an aura in our times, but it's called ojas in Sanskrit. It's a very ancient principle, ojas. And that holy company, as we were studying last weekend and 2 weekends ago, leads you to your guru. Sometimes this isn't in the exact order that this happens, but traditionally this is how it's being put here, because prana is wanting now to be connected to the mind. So the mantra is given by the guru in holy company, in holy atmosphere, and the psychic prana then becomes awake That's the power that drives your thoughts, not just the power that causes you to move your body or the power that causes you to see or hear, because that's a very powerful thing to contemplate too, which is why Father of Yoga wants you to use sight, hearing, taste, and meditate on them. It's called an alambana. Somebody just wrote me today and said, when I concentrate on something in meditation, my meditations are very powerful. So that's everything from a pratika, they call it in India. Could be a stone Buddha or a little statue of Ram or Krishna. Pratima it's also called. All the way up to an alambana, where the outer object connects to the inner meditation in a kind of visualization way. You do both Upasana and Vipassana in Vedanta, and they have their deep connotations. And so then you see the psychic prana, with that awake, you become a deep thinker. Chittalochana, they call that. And then that turns into Chittabhati. Chittabhati is, of course, how you get beyond thought and intelligence. So these are well-known words that you could put along with this manaha prana sambandha word to meditate upon. So the word is very important all the way along here, right up to the mantra. The words that you heard back when you were first starting the path were very specific and very geared towards awakening. So last week we took up the psychic prana and we looked at it at how many different levels: physical, energetical, or then emotional, philosophical, psychological, intellect, and then spiritual. So 6 or 7 different levels on that chart, cause and effect in the mind. So you can see that we reached deeply in the course of this chart, right down into the prana that you use in everyday life. But we trace it to its origin now, and that origin ultimately is called Shakti, and this is where this fourth pillar we're heading toward, if you want to call this a chart of 4 pillars. We're heading now towards Shakti power, and we'll look at that today to close things up, because there's not a lot to say about Samadhi and Brahman, and it's something to be experienced by each practitioner. Although some great teachers like Father of Yoga have given us great teachings on it, the different kinds of Samadhi, and Sri Ramakrishna has, of course, exemplified them in this day and age. So we looked into conducting worship and contemplating scripture, these next 2 rungs of this ladder, these pillars. And we made it into contemplating scripture and self-surrender and perform work as worship comes next. So you could see how that 4th yoga, karma yoga, you've got bhakti, devotion, you've got jnanam, wisdom, you've got dhyanam or raja or ashtanga, or the 8-limbed yoga, which is the ascetic yoga, not to be confused with physical yoga that they're talking about today. And then the 4th yoga, karma yoga, and that's very important to the rishis of India, to bring this realization that you've gotten from psychic prana and higher thinking full circle back down into your life, and then share it with others. So that's coming up on this chart. If we were to run ahead real quick, you could see, make your introduction to Shakti. Psychic prana will actually turn right into Shakti power because she's in charge of psychic prana. Then you can meditate on the highest of all forms, called Ishvara, God with form in the highest or deepest sense. Attain samadhis by that meditation, and then meditate directly on Brahman, which is better still, as Shankara says, and then help souls out of bondage. So if you didn't have that perform work as worship in there, you might not be that efficient at helping people out of bondage. Or you might confuse them, thinking, get them in a place where Arjuna is in the Gita when he asks, which is better, those who act or those who give up action? And Krishna, very surprisingly, says those who do it consciously. So that's for Arjuna to hear with the ears and his understanding at that time. so that he can fulfill his karmas. Otherwise, you say, if Krishna had said, give up works and follow me, which could be good for some souls, depending on the level of their maturity, but then could have left Arjuna with a lot of desires for fulfilling work yet, and a lot of loose ends in his life if he had just walked away. Sri Krishna said, "Fie on you if you give up the activities that you're doing in life prematurely." So you have to satisfy them, get yourself in a position, qualify yourself, which we'll look at the end of this class, and then you'll be very able at helping people out of bondage, helping them snap the chains of bondage. So let's look at work as worship real quick here. He also called it, because that's a phrase Vivekananda talked about, labor as love. So he was, you could see that Swami Vivekananda was very big on making karma yoga into one of the main 4 pillars, if we're still talking about 4 pillars here in a related sense. So you can see by this chart that we'll look at now, I'm not going to take you through all 4 of them. That's come to a seminar or come to a retreat, because we've used this 4 yoga as a subject for our retreats before and been very illumined by the study. And you can see here that the karma yoga part of it is in the lower right box. So let's look at what work as worship means when they talk about karma yoga, describing it as the yoga of selfless action. If you just described it as just your everyday actions, well, then it's not really a yoga, is it? Because it's not putting you into union with work and the cause and effects and the fruits. And maybe you're not getting positive fruits out of your work. And it's also very possible that it's pulling you down away from the spiritual ideal, which it does because you need time to spend, not just with your children, and quality time they call it nowadays, but with your children to teach them this. So you have to learn it yourself. And so it goes much deeper when you talk about work as worship in our tradition. And in Vedanta, the Neo-Vedanta of Vivekananda today, very big. He apportioned his Matan mission, his Ramakrishna order, so that some of the monks who wanted just to meditate and gain liberation, moksha, in that lifetime, they were ready for it, could do so and not have to engage in works. But the mission part of the Ramakrishna mission, Ramakrishna order, was for those beings who he wanted to work selflessly for the good of the world and help it in a true sense, not just lip service help, not help based upon trying to help them before you're realized yourself. And that is trying to get someone free of bondage when you're still bound. Saying in India is, there's hardly enough room in your bed for you, and you're asking others to sleep in it with you. So the idea there is that you perfect yourself and then you go and practice the karma yoga in an undistracted manner, knowing the goal of karma yoga is to get beyond action. So Vivekananda used to say that quite often. The real purpose for action is for knowledge, and then knowledge can get you beyond the need to act, or to act and react, as we were talking about yesterday at satsang when we were together. Also, he used to say that work could be the burning midday sun that scorches the very vitals of humanity. So he was an interesting person as far as a karma yogi goes, because he had mastered all these yogas. I'll show you a chart on that at the end again. But he would make karma yoga sound like it could be a scorching midday sun on one hand if he knew you were stuck in it, or he could tell you master it and then use it to help the world. It's the only way to do it, like Arjuna is supposed to do in the Gita. So you can't take what these great beings say as contradictions when it sounds like they are. You've got to reason it out and apply it to time and space, location, locale, person, personality, level of karma, if you will. and what needs to be worked out yet, or how it applies to a free soul, a soul that's free already. So you can see here, Krishna says, performing actions selflessly and continually while taking refuge in me, by my grace he reaches the eternal, undecaying abode. So engage only in obligatory actions, Karma Yoga says. Don't take on more than you can handle. I'm going to make short commentaries on this so we move towards the end of this class series today. Don't take on more than you can handle. If it comes into your periphery, needs to be taken up, and you have some sort of issue with it, or you have some sort of, you're called upon to do this particular work, then it's a good chance the Divine Mother has brought it to you to fulfill. But don't go looking for it. These obligatory actions will be enough of you. That is, usually they say actions that are not contrary to the ordinances of the scriptures. I think that's a direct quote from the Vedas. Works that are not contrary to the ordinances of the scriptures. So you have to check that out with the scriptures. Well, let's go back and do that. You see, contemplate the scriptures so that we've heard these in the right way. Renounce action done for selfish motive, because of course if it's selfless action, then that's contrary or contradictory to what you're trying to seek. So that action that's done for selfish motive, you renounce it. Vivekananda made an amazing statement once about that when he said, when I think back, I can't think of one thing that I ever did for myself. I did everything for others. So it's like Holy Mother saying, when I think back on my life, I never committed any sin whatsoever. So why this suffering? She's talking about some rashes she was getting, or some malaria that she had contracted. So these beings are just pure and selfless. And of course, then the karmas will come to them when they take them on. So they can discriminate between where these karmas come from. Like one of our favorite sayings that Vivekananda said, karmas come back quickly to an advanced spiritual person, but they take much longer to come back to a person who's not spiritually advanced. And that's why it's got a very slow cycle, some of this bad karma, and happens later. And you don't know why it happened, so you become confused. But if you do something that's unthought or untoward, and it comes back to you that afternoon or that day, oh, I see, that connects to that, I should be careful. And then you're called a person that's mindful, or in Buddhism, or a person who's conscious and aware. And Karma Yoga that way becomes a very good determinative factor, or a gauge, a measuring device in your daily life. Perform all action with evenness of mind. Much like Sri Sharda Devi saying, you can't accomplish anything when you work with restless mind. You need peace of mind first and foremost. So make sure that you're in a peaceful mind when you undertake any work. Remember, work here is what? Work you do with the external prana, work you do with the internal prana. Basically, work you do with the body and food, and external action and food and thought. Basically, is what we're talking about here. Just erase, you see, and put those two right there. That's what is meant. The prana itself, an unseen thing as it flows, but it's inferred when it stops flowing, because then that's when tamas and rajas come to you, and that's what they're talking about here. Make sure you have evenness of mind called sattva. You can get pure sattva later, but right now attain that sattvic state and make sure you don't do any work that isn't in that sattvic state. To the best of your ability. Do not seek the fruits of action. That's, of course, probably the most famous law, rule of thumb, about karma yoga. If you heard even in your 20s, or when we were back in the 60s and 70s, if you heard about Sri Krishna and the Gita in a Christian country where you were born and raised, the first thing and maybe the only thing that they'd say about that is you're not supposed to seek the fruits of your action. And so it was the first bit of philosophical thought you were giving on the subject of how to act and how not to act. So you begin thinking about that and considering it. Do not seek the fruits of your action. And of course that's not going to make much sense to a materialistic businessman. I've heard swamis tell me the same. Well, I tried to talk to this Hindu gentleman who's got a lot of businesses and makes a lot of money. I was trying to tell him about the laws of karma yoga and he just couldn't accept it. And I've heard the same said about Western businessmen, probably more so, is that they don't see any reason not to work for gain. So capitalism and materialism and all those things and the problems that they're generating out here, you could look back and say, well, we should have listened to the great souls about work and done everything selflessly and in an even state of mind and not for any fruits. If you could do those three things, these three bullet points, then your work would not accrue negative karma and you'd feel free every day. And you could then get beyond feelings of being free and actually become free, like this great soul we're talking about, Swami Vivekananda. Detach from all the outcomes of action. So it doesn't say detach from action, so don't get confused. Like, that's why Arjuna was asking Krishna the question on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So it's detached from the outcomes of action. Why is that? Because it'll affect that evenness of mind you're trying to attain back here. If something goes awry, and even if it wasn't your fault, or particularly if it was, then the sattva will go out of your day and the next morning you'll wake up restless or in sorrow. A man of constant sorrows, as I heard in a beautiful song the other day that reminded me of that. I'm a man of constant sorrows. I've suffered all my days. The first two lines of the song. So, detach from the outcomes of action and perform all work as worship. So I seized upon that particular karmic law, because these are, where did I get these? From the Ramayana, Sri Ram, and from the Gita, Sri Krishna, and then flash ahead to Swami Vivekananda and his new karma yoga take. That's where you find the best things about karma. So in a class series about karma and mantra, then it's fit and meet that we bring them up. So perform all work as worship. If you didn't do that, what would it look like, people ask? Well, then it would be back to selfishness. You'd be doing things for selfish motive. You'd have some sort of selfish intention in it that would color it, probably color it dark, which would then affect the guna of your mind, and you wouldn't be even again. And you'd be seizing upon works that, for objects that are not ultimately real. You'd be transgressing these high Vedantic and Advaitic laws right away if you fell into that way of thinking. So, do all work for selfish intention? That's not what you would hear from them. You see, do all work as worship. Labor with love. Keep that sensitivity for all beings and all things in your life. It'll be good for you. And utilize it to serve God and mankind. I've always brought up the point that he's not saying serve mankind. He never made that mistake, because the altruists sometimes think in that direction, and it doesn't go very far. Helps a little, but doesn't, well, there are other reasons why it doesn't help a world like this, because this world, very much in need of help, has always been that way and can never be really helped. There's no such thing as a world if you take that to the non-dual level. There's only Brahman. So you have to understand that at a very high level of Advaita, which we're working towards. If you'll just give me another 45 minutes, we might be able to say something about that. Utilize all work to serve God and mankind, not to serve mankind. I thought about that myself, and I thought, well, if you serve somebody, God as man, then they'll get very inflated. They'll want to be worshipped. They'll want to be served. You're talking about kings and queens of every country and every nation and in every religion, even India, have these kings and queens and royalty that want to be served. But you might want to take that crown off your head at some point and put it on the altar. We'll get to that. Divine Mother and Ishvara, or Ishvara and Ishvari, they really are the ones that want to wear the crowns. So kings and queens should bow to them. And to the extent that they did in India, then you had very just and high-minded rulers. But if you served God and mankind, then you're not serving the ego, you see. Then the person thinks, other than, oh, he's serving me, I must be great. You're serving actually what's in me. Then I must be very small to see that. So I shrink my ego down, as we were talking about in an email exchange probably with one of you watching right now, just this morning, about shrinking and dwindling that ego down so it's transparent. And so you can see that light of Brahman behind it, see the self in all, and all as to self, as they say. That's penultimate, and the final bullet point here as we work through this 1/4 of this very beautiful chart on Chaturdasha Yoga, the 4 yogas mentioned by Sri Krishna way back in the Gita and brought forward for a new Neo-Vedanta facelift by Swami Vivekananda. This last point is work meticulously but with detachment. Probably see that these bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, pretty much cover everything you need to know about karma yoga in its essence. The last one being that you don't do work in a slovenly way, like, use detachment and particularly renunciation as an excuse not to do work. I'll just do it slovenly. So people sweeping a house with a broom, sweeping the ashram, then they got done sweeping and they just threw the broom down, and Holy Mother saw that and she said, the broom may be dirty, but it cleans dirty places. Please treat it with respect, put it over there in the corner, in that closet where it belongs. And so you could see that she was very careful about how she served everything. Atman is not just in beings, it's in animals, insects, plants, objects, as the underlying self in all. And that's why we're looking at prana, because that's the way to trace it. Prana is the life force of everything, that's giving it its animacy, that's giving it its sheen, that's giving it its shine, it's giving it its power to radiate all the way into the deepest point where, as I was saying earlier, it's the intelligence itself that will be radiating out as Shakti, and we're just about to get to that. So hard to leave a chart like this, but let's leave it with, for now, with a quote. So Vivekananda said, "Would be to God that all men were so constituted that in their minds all of these elements, philosophy, that's jnanam, and mysticism, that's yoga, raja, emotion, that's bhakti, and work, karma, were equally present in full." So he wants this synthesis of yoga, integral yoga. It's been called by people, teachers, since Vivekananda was here, has been seized upon. But his master, Sri Ramakrishna, exemplified full mastery of all 4 of those. And Vivekananda was the harbinger of this Chaturdasha Yoga, straight from the heart of Sri Krishna in the Gita in this day and age. So Purna Yoga would be a good way to say it in Sanskrit. It's the fullness of yoga. Or what we'll talk about next week at seminar, because might as well say it now, we're not going to be here at class next Sunday. But Saturday and Sunday we're going to be on seminar that you can join. So look into that by writing to SRV, because it's going to be called the Fire of Yoga. And we're going to look, that's a statement of Vivekananda, that he had the fire of yoga. So we're going to look deep into that statement. So he says, to continue, everyone that has only 1 or 2 of these elements, I consider one-sided. And this world is almost full of such one-sided beings, with knowledge of that one road only in which they move. So there are more channels to open up inside of us, if you want to say that. This whole chart, and I've been wanting to put it this way since I first showed it to all of you 8 classes ago, can be expressed by very nicely in just two of Shankara's beautiful slokas, verses in Bhaja Govindam, where he sings. Geyam Gita Namashashram Deyam Shripati Rupa Vajasram Deyam Sajada Sange Chittam Deyam Dina Jayanaya Chavitam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Mudamate Samprapte Sanihite Kale Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukrin Karane. He goes on with more. Pranayamam pracyaharam nitya nitya viveka vicharam japyam sameta samadhi vidanam korvam vadanam mahavadadanam bhaja govindam bhaja govindam bhaja govindam mudamate samprapte sanihite kale nahi nahi rakshati bukrin karane. Verses 23 and 30 tell us this about this whole practice, you might say. It's summed up here. He says, the offering of religious gifts, taking refuge in religious vows, embarking on pilgrimage to where the Ganges meets the sea, none of these grants a man release, unless a man possesses knowledge of the self, the Atman. He will not attain freedom, not even in 100 years. And goes on to say, make sure I'm getting these verses right here. Read the Gita, recite the Sahasranam. That's the 1,000 verses on the Lord. Meditate daily on the form of the Lord of Lakshmi. Lead the mind always to holy company. Distribute your wealth constantly among the poor for good purposes. Withdraw the breath, withdraw the senses from their objects. Discriminate well, constantly between the real and the unreal. Control the mind and senses with the recitation of the mantra. Perform all of these with great care. And that way you would come to this realization of work as worship. So the whole thing is expressed very nicely there by Shankara in his Bhaja Govindam. Just two of these 30 verses which I have on hand right here. So hold on to your hats or your dhotis or whatever it is you're wearing at this time as we move on right away, and we can come back and look at this chart. In classes we've already given, YouTube classes and so forth, and or keep in tune with us, and you'll probably see it in a retreat or brought up in a class on the Upanishads. But if we move past this to this fourth pillar, which is Shakti power, then we see how the implication here is really that food, its energy, breath, life and breath, life breath, prana, life force, the same life force that pervades the mind and causes the mind to think, to produce the worlds, because mind, everything comes out of the mind in the mind-only schools. And leading right to the Shakti power, Divine Mother, is that vast difference between a mind-only school in practice and a mind-only school in practice that reaches its culmination in Shakta Advaitavata, in a non-duality that includes the worship of Mother as the essential ingredient in it. So here we are with this chart of the 5 precious peas. If we talk about Mother, we can look at Holy Mother. She's the most recent example, lived into the 1920s, so she far outlived Sri Ramakrishna's physical form. And gave the mantra to hundreds and thousands of souls in her lifetime, and had perfection in mantra. Japaharini, she's called. So, and she knows all the deities, all the mantras, and can transmit them to people. Sri Ramakrishna said he would leave her behind for this very act, plus more. So she is the motherhood of God here, exemplified before us. And in this very simple chart, her great teachings can be boiled down to something very simple that she often says. I saw in the books on her, that people recounting being with her in this lifetime, that she had mentioned these 5 precious P's, which this is the way I'm putting it. Simply put, patience, perseverance, peace of mind, peace, purification, and practice. So there you see them, and quotes about them spread across this chart. Very easy study. You can see that basically, if you do all of this with those 5 P's, then you're aimed directly at uniting with her. You're going to meet the Shakti power within you, and that Shakti power is going to take you into the highest state of mind and beyond mind, where the power of Mother Kali takes you beyond form. So about patience, she said this: perhaps one performs japa of the mantra in one lifetime, then patiently does some more in the next. In this way, and with such perseverance, the soul can certainly gain freedom from bondage in the end. And this is how she talked about doing anything with patience and perseverance. And once she gave this teaching from a story she heard. A farmer carried a weak young calf from the barn to the field every day. This became a habit. Later, people were shocked to see that man carrying a grown bull to the field. All of this was the result of perseverance. So, of course, she's using that as an example of to keep something up once you start it. You start something and let it down. It, of course, doesn't reach its fruition, number one. And as a father of yoga says, it acts as an impediment the next time you try and complete it. So you might start to practice the piano when you're young, and then maybe pick it up in your 20s and 30s. But since you didn't start it and finish it when you were young, people complained about the fact that they cannot make headway in the practice of such an instrument. I've seen that because I'm a musician. So it's really good to start something, have a teacher, hold with it, have patience, persevere, and have a pure motive in what you do. In that case, it would be music. Play music for God, as my teacher once told me, not for people. It's like, again, the karma yoga laws. And continue the practice, maybe even after culmination of the fruit. If you grabbed onto the fruit, you might waylay yourself or impede yourself from reaching that goal, which is beyond getting, gaining, receiving, and giving up. Beyond renunciation, which is in that level would be kind of as the Avadutta Gita and the Ashtavakra Samhita say, it's the poison of renunciation you want to renounce at some point. So about peace of mind, and I mentioned it earlier, she says, work done in tamas and rajas brings karma to bear. On the other side of the chart, therefore you need peace of mind first and foremost. So it's not just, you poor thing, please gain back your peace of mind so you can live an ordinary peaceful life. It's that these works that you're doing in a tamasic and rajasic state, back to our fourth yoga that we looked at there, karma yoga, are going to bring reactions, effects of the cause that are rajasic and tamasic themselves. So you color the act by the state of mind you're in, and the karma that comes back colored by that state of mind you did the work in. So it's a kind of taint that they've noticed when they practice. And this is why Purity is next. Chit Shuddhi means the mind that constantly thinks of divine reality. Pure mind is God, she says. So this purification process goes on humbly in the sincere seeker and continually, and that's what's called sadhana or practice, where she says here, where is that competent student who can understand spiritual instruction? Without such fitness, teachings will prove futile. As we were talking yesterday about feeding pigeons with peas and corn, picking the pigeon up later and seeing that those things had stuck in its craw and it hadn't digested them. So for us that means, Sri Ramakrishna's story means that when we get the peas and corns of gem-like teachings of the Dharma from the Guru, we have to not just hear them and leave them in our craw of intellectual mind only, but we have to contemplate them and digest them and get nourished by them. So nourishment is, of course, one of the main hidden facets in all of this. Not just food nourishment for the health of your body, mukhya prana it's called, but nourishment that turns into actual pure prana based on pure breath and raising that prana up the spine as kundalini, which is later, and purifying the mind along the way, which is psychic prana. You can have a perfectly healthy body, but your thoughts can be impure. And then you get pure thoughts, your intellect can still be skewed. So this prana flowing unimpeded, as the chant says, Bhadram Karni Bihi Sriniyama Devaha, means that we should live healthy minds, live lives of service, of healthy minds and bodies to all living beings. So that means that this prana has to circulate and raise itself in the form of spiritual power. The special word for that in our tradition is kundalini, which has a very deep connection with Vedanta, Tantra, and Yoga. And as you'll see next weekend when I teach the seminar, has a very deep connection with the mother, the Buddhas, to Pragyaparamita, and the centers that get purified in meditation. So India has always been thinking about this. If we were to put any kind of a conclusion on such a beautiful teaching as the 5 Ps, then we might want to say it like this to salute her. Namaste Sharanye Shive Sanukampe Namaste Jagat Vyapike Vishwarupe Namaste Jagadvanja Padaravinye Namaste Jagadtarini Trahi Durge Namaste Jagachincha Manaswarupe Namaste Mahayogini Gyanarupe Namaste Sadananda Nanda Svarupe Namaste Jagat Tarini Trahe Durge Anatasya Dinasya Trishna Turashya Vayartasya vitasya padasya jantaho Tvameka gatir devi nishtara jatri namaste Jagatarini Traye Durge. Which means in English, I bow down devoutly to the true refuge of all beings, who along with Lord Shiva destroys ignorance, soothes the miseries of relative existence. O thou in whom the universe resides, and who permeates it entirely, your lotus feet are most worthy of worship. O Durga, O Sharada, Supreme Savioress, salutations to thee. For all who look within, your excellent form is the true object of meditation. For yoga and jnanam are embodied perfectly in thee. You are the consummate yogini, the auspicious one. The Lord turns blissful and gets delight upon beholding thee. O Savior of the universe, Mother Durga, Mother Sharada, protect us all eternally. The devotees get relief from the suffering simply upon remembering thee. The poor, the downtrodden, the helpless feel thy compassion and its touch as well. All fear, doubt, and desire finds an end in thee. Afflictions are healed, and bonds are rent asunder when you appear. Thus you'll bestow emancipation on all beings. Victory unto thee. So, she's been sung about for ages in these ancient slokas of different scriptures. And we see her here in her present incarnation as Holy Mother, Shri Sharada. Sharada is a name for Saraswati, a very ancient Vedic goddess. Durga, more tantric, and Kali, more tantric, at least to our reckoning in this day and age. So we have these different forms of the one Shakti. So we have arrived in this 9-class series to this great fourth pillar within us, where Shakti power is alive and rising in our centers, in our spiritual centers called chakras. And she's making herself known to us at different levels of our understanding. The three lower worlds, as you can see here by this beautiful third sloka, the poor, the downtrodden, and the helpless, they feel your compassion as well. So right on down here into the very realm of matter, even in the Kali Yuga, which is a materialistic age, a dark age where spirituality has gone missing in most minds and hearts, there she is working hard on our behalf for our highest benefit. So there's why we have so many beautiful songs about her, and take every opportunity to try and sing them. So now if we want to move on with Shakti in hand, in mind and in heart, to meditate upon her, or upon Ishvara. Ishvara is the male form of the highest deity possible for the human mind to comprehend, quote unquote, Vivekananda. And Ishvari would of course be the feminine version of that, the divine goddess. So that's the next rung of this ladder as we head towards this Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Beautiful that in this very sloka that we just chanted, that it says, the Lord becomes blissful and gets delight upon beholding thee. That's him. When Shiva sees Shakti rising and sees Shakti manifesting in all beings, then he falls supine and in ecstasy and sees her. And sometimes you see the icons of her dancing on his chest, like they say that he's the flower and she's the fragrance that's coming out. So this is the tantric ideal of Shiva and Shakti together as one, and the great love that they have for each other and for all of creation, and also the highest intention that beings with that Shakti power within them, if they've forgotten, will follow such a regimen as this with 5 Ps and reach this 4th pillar of Shakti awakening. You might say the game is over there. Maya is undone, and it's seen as her Maya. It was another way of putting that. So she was holding veils that, like the skin of a mango, need to be removed when the fruit was ripe. All this was the ripening process of the soul seeing itself as her. As we heard last Wednesday in a beautiful hymn, a poem written by our founder, Lexics, and peace and bliss be upon him, said, "O meditator, become the goddess." So when the Shakta, who is worshipping Divine Mother, with all of this behind them, all of this qualification behind them, reaches Shakti power within itself, then it can meditate unimpeded upon Divine Mother of the Universe. It's a very blissful thing, and all the earlier impediments of meditation simply evaporate away, and it's easily to focus upon her. Residing in the heart is the best place. And I heard last week some teachers I didn't agree with saying, let's go down and meditate in the root chakra and all this. I think we've done that long enough. I think it's time to do what the Upanishads tell you. Realize your true self as the Atman, as the Mother herself, because she is your essence, and meditate in the heart upon her. That will make both directions, 3 below, 3 above, as they say in Kundalini Yoga, the true knowers like Sri Ramakrishna. There are 3 chakras below the heart, 3 chakras above the heart. And so right in the center there is where you would meditate on Divine Mother. And millions now are using this very form. This is a statue of her dressed up at a worship at the Ramakrishna order in one of its centers in India. And her image, her icon, her murti, is in full size like that in so many shrines and altars across India now and throughout the world at Vedanta centers. And here I'm looking at one in our center right behind the camera as I speak about her. So you have a contemporary manifestation and a full incarnation of the Divine Mother of the Universe right here in this day and age. Tripura Sundari, the 3 aspects of the most beautiful, whom we just sang about. First in her picture, or in her pratika, in her murti. Second, as you meditate upon her inside of you, as Ishvari, as the Antaryami of your heart, the inner ruler controller, who is just waiting for you to purify yourself and move to unite with her so that she can rise in you as Kundalini, one of her favorite forms. As, I think maybe it was Vashishta or one of the rishis of his period was talking about that she loves to sport in the purastika body once it's pure. So purastika body is 8-fold basically. You've got 5 elements, and mind and threefold mind and so forth. So the purastika body, if she gets into it, and she's hidden at first, then she doesn't like to sport in it. She express with it if there's impurities in it. We used to say that's a good God blog we should remember too, is that basically if a woman sees a spider crawl in her shoe, Sri Ramakrishna said, she'll never put it on again. Even when the husband chases it out and shows her and puts his hand in the shoe and everything, she's just disinclined to put that shoe on, is the story that is not about spiders and shoes so much as it is about these dark spiders of bad thought and negativity and impurity that are within our chakras, that are within our centers of being, which are disallowing us to move inward to deeper and better places of our consciousness, refined intellect, matured ego, buoyant thoughts, and non-dual mind. That's called talk about mana, prana, sambandha. Then you're talking about this fourfold mind that she won't sport in if it remains closed down. But when you turn the four aspects of that mind, along with the senses, pure by these practices, because that's, practices right there is one of the main things in the 5 Ps. Then she loves to sport in that. So that's a beautiful visualization to have as you think about her. So meditate upon Ishvara and attain these samadhis and meditate upon Brahman. So we kind of know what it looks like. Imagine yourself in practice phase in between these first 2 pillars, what you were like when you were younger. Now imagine yourself as you begin to purify the prana, do your mantra, find a guru, hear the teachings, conduct worship, contemplate the scriptures under the eye of the acharya, the teacher, then find this experience so overwhelming that you can actually finally surrender the ego to a higher power, and then perform all work as worship. All the work you did prior to that was leading up to this point where she revealed herself to you. And then imagine yourself sitting in meditation, whether it's 12 days and 12 nights or 49 days, you're meditating upon this pure self with the pure energy. So that pure self is at its highest level is called Brahman. So in the remaining time, and I hope we have enough, to take up the 7 levels of inner knowledge, of higher knowledge, in those fitted for the Brahman state. It's a 2-part chart because the top shows you these 7 levels of higher knowledge, and the bottom half shows you Krishna's teachings of who is fitted for that Brahman state. So you could see as you reach, and we're talking now about these higher, deeper rungs of the ladder, samadhi and meditation on Brahman, who is qualified to meditate that way, and what happens to them. First of all, realization of inherent knowledge happens. All education is a manifestation of the knowledge already within you, is one of our favorite quotes of Vivekananda. I mean, if you had to select one, there are so many of his great quotes. So education you're trying to get is really just a manifestation of the knowledge that's already within you. Like the musk deer searching for that fragrance outside of itself, we go looking for knowledge outside of ourselves in objects, in schools, and in teachers and so forth. But there are versions of those inner teachers, inner schools like Vedanta, and inner objects like our higher thoughts, which are available to us. And so we need to then turn that within ourselves. He says here, the object in work is purification of the soul. Soul there is lowercase, so it means mind. In order to make it fit for knowledge. So you have to make yourself fit for the realization of the knowledge that's already within you. It's a different way of thinking about it than going out and seeking knowledge outside of yourself as if that's going to fulfill you. Then dukkha samyoga viyogam. The second is elimination of pain. And he says about that, Swamiji, it is glorious to withhold the soul from suffering with the body. This beautiful picture over here on the right-hand side is one of the more recent pictures they found of him some years ago. They found 2, I think, in an attic or in a collection of someone in the West. So beautiful that we had 2 more to add to our collection of him when he was here in the West in the late 1800s, early 1900s. these 7 levels of higher knowledge are then known by the seers. That's why we're qualifying ourselves with Shakti power behind us and all of our practice behind us to be able to meditate directly on Brahman. Because we know that hearing about Brahman is good. Meditating on Brahman is better, but that meditation upon which doubt and fear dies away, as we've been saying, is best of all. Then samadhi sampadanam is attainment of samadhi, which is right here. These 3 are so closely related. Meditating on your ishtam, or your chosen ideal, if you want English for that word. Attaining samadhis by meditating upon them, which are these deep devotional and knowledge samadhis that happen to people, wisdom samadhis, and that leads you to seeing this ocean of light, which you've heard so much about, but seeing it all within you, not outside, like in space or at the beach tomorrow. This inner ocean of splendor that is your very self. And then that gives you perfect vision. Here's where we could go into a teaching on the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path of the Buddha. You see how close that Samyak Darshan is actually mentioned in the Ashtanga Marga of Buddha, the Eightfold Path. So he says about that, actually the last 2 he says, it is glorious to withhold the soul from suffering with the body. That's the elimination of pain. Then remain immersed in samadhi, but come out in order to help others. Then, all the while, all the little thought whirlpools into which the mind has broken declare one single aim, a vision and a search for the unity of being. So enough of this outer fragmentation and duality. You're working yourself from dualism to qualified non-dualism to non-dualism in company of all of your inner powers, your yogic powers, not the occult powers, the yogic powers. They're different. They're called the 8 great powers of God, not the Ashtabala Siddhas, which lead you astray. So basically, you have with Shakti as your guide at the hull of your ship, at the wheel. Then you're reaching deep inside of yourself and having this perfect vision in your meditation. You have it recurring over time, and that gives you the sense of absolute freedom. That is, that freedom was always there. Moksha, mukti, is a state that's always at hand. It's not something you get by practice over time, via evolution, or via getting rid of sin after falling from grace, yada yada. In Vedanta, we've heard it all for a long time, how freedom is an eternal state that's always at hand, and all these other things have been placed over it as false superimpositions, and you just come along and tear them away, and this perfect vision reveals itself to you. We have that on good authority from fully realized souls, but also of her divine husband, Sri Sharada's divine husband, in his experience of nirvikalpa samadhi. Attain nirvikalpa samadhi. So freedom is the condition of growth. Take that off, the result is degeneration. So you're not going to get very far if you think yourself to be bound. You should know yourself to be free, and then prove it. Because you're not free until you know you're free. Then Triguna Titatvam is next, the 6th and penultimate state of higher knowledge. Dissolution of the gunas. The gunas keep the jivatman in the body from joining the paramatman. Jivatman is the smaller embodied self with that ego in tow, and the paramatman is this great self of which you have to make an offering. Let's make an offering of the lower self into the higher self, as the chant goes. Always delight in that offering, always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. That's the Upanishads and the peace chants. Finally, Brahmanishta comes, immersion in Brahman, absolute full identity, and this is also a beautiful tantric qualification, one of the highest of the 7 tantric qualifications for a tantric aspirant. And Vivekananda says about it, when I think I am Brahman, then I alone exist. It is so when I think so, but if I'm in doubt, I don't think so, or I have doubts about it, or I fear it, then it's putting itself off for another day, which means another lifetime, or for whatever reason it gets put off, for another path, for another guru, for a different scripture, or for common everyday life. So you don't want to put that off. So the lower half of the chart, you can see easy forbearance of those gunas and their influence. When those beings who are trigunatita transcend the gunas, it doesn't mean like, oh, they've gone away forever because I still have a body and a mind. So they get into an easy forbearance of gunic influence, which doesn't affect their Brahman state. Steady abidance in Brahmagyan. Oh, you don't prefer lower knowledge anymore. That can be as it may, but the higher knowledge is where you tend to dwell. Abidance in the Atman and higher knowledge. And finally, perfect transcendence of all dualities. So this is where I say, from before fundamentalism to dualism to qualified non-dualism to non-dualism with Advaita, with Shakti in tow, you see, as your guide, then you can accomplish this deep turn within that we're talking about beyond the 4th pillar and reach the highest state of awareness. We have a few minutes left, and I might go a little over just to conclude this class, but I wanted to show you a bit what that looks like, that kind of full qualification. This chart again is another one we've used for whole retreats and whole class series, because when I thought and meditated on Swami Vivekananda as the Ishvara form for so many years, then I thought at one point how much that he had inherent. And remember back here we had the inherent knowledge as being the 2nd step of yoga. They say the 2nd step of higher wisdom is that you come to know all knowledge lies within you. At that point everything really shifts, and you're not so interested in seeking it outside in objects, in matter, and so forth and so on, and you won't be satisfied seeking it in food or posture or energy or even in thought, psychic prana. It has to go its full depth. It has to go all the way. Not just all 9 yards, to use a Western analogy. It's got to be a touchdown in the Vedantic football way. So here you see, as I meditate upon Swami Vivekananda, all of what he must know as that knowledge within him. And this is something that you qualify yourself, you cut your teeth on. So it's too much to take on in even a retreat, I found out. But you can take each one of these blocks, because these are 6, 7 different darshanas of India, ways of clear seeing or paths. So we could say at least that much before we conclude the series here. Vedanta has been what we've been talking mostly about. This whole path is pretty much in Vedanta, but it definitely borrows elements from Tantra and Yoga in it, and even, like I was saying, Buddhism, which isn't any different than India. So under Vedanta, the main thing there is neti neti. You weed the garden, you get rid of everything that's gotten in your way for so long, and then everything becomes clear, and there's some of the ways that you can do that. Patanjali's yoga, called Ashtanga yoga, because we have to also give it 4 names, and it's because it's such a huge darshana in today and in India, is also called Patanjali, so it was named after this great soul. It's an Ashtanga yoga with 8 limbs. We've looked on that, and we'll look deeper about it, but it has to do with practice to the nth degree. This is practice very much so, but it's showing you aspects of practice, telling you that these are the things that you will encounter, like Guru Yoga, or mantra, japa mantra practice, or Bhakti Yoga, or Jnana Yoga. You could then show how of each of these point specifically to something in the darshana itself that you're supposed to practice in order to qualify yourself with. Then Samkhya is there. They want you into Tattvavid. You have to know the principles, 24 of them at least, that make up the worlds of name and form and time and space. Not just the outer one again. They'll take you inward. And that's a lot of what's in here too, because some of the tattvas are actually shown in this course. At the bottom in the middle you see Vasishta's yoga. I mentioned that great soul. He's very much interested in Atmagyan. So that abiding in Brahmagyan, which was the 6th of these higher stages of wisdom we just looked at in the last chart, would be at the basis of his great yoga called Vasishta's yoga. Kundalini yoga is next as we go up the right-hand side. Shaktipat, which is exactly what we're talking about here, but maybe not so much in the way we look at it in the West in contemporary times, that somebody hits you on the head with a peacock feather, or has you meditate on a crystal, or touches you, or does something, gives you some strange initiation, but more that you find a knower of reality who is a master of Kundalini yoga, and like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and he can confer that upon his 16 direct disciples. And then you'd probably be saying something like this, if we want to end right here with a fitting ending for this series, because the rest are, Tantra and Buddhism. They want you to have Upasana Jnana in Tantra, and there's the great qualifications are there. Also, 37 limbs of enlightenment in Buddhism. Wow, that's a system to look into that has that 8-fold path contained in it, for instance. But back to Kundalini Yoga, since so much of here has been around Shakti power as a pivotal place, then you can see that they want you to know about this Divine Mother reality. She's very hidden, so it's very difficult to entice her out. She doesn't accept cheap bribes, the songs of India say, like sacrifice of animals or things that people have gotten into in at low periods. It's not the right worship to do that kind of thing. So she doesn't accept cheap bribes. She loves wisdom very much. She loves words very much, mantras. And she loves her children who teach, like Krishna says in the Gita. So these things, if you focus on for a while, you're bound to catch her attention. She'll come to you in some lifetime. And everything that is inherent in you will effloresce, just naturally so. You have to give it 5 Ps, but nevertheless, patience and perseverance will be there. So we would sing something like Jaya Swami Vivekananda, Brahmananda Ki Jai, Duryananda Yogananda, Om Kali Ma, Jaya Swami Abhedananda, Premananda Ki Jai, Sharananda Shivananda, Om Kali Ma, Jaya Trigunatitananda, Adbhutananda Ki Jai, Subodhananda Vijnanananda, Om Kali Ma, Jaya Ramakrishna Nanda, Akhandananda Ki Jai, Advaita Nanda Niranjana Nanda Om Kali Ma Om Sharada Om Sharada Jai Shri Ramakrishna Om Sharada Om Sharada Om Sharada Jai Shri Ramakrishna Om Sharada Jai Shri Ramakrishna Om Sharada Jai Shri Ramakrishna Om Sharada. May peace betide all. May wisdom, higher wisdom, come unto all. May all see the face of truth and be fortified by the armor of love. Om Bhadram Karnebhihe Sriniyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyema Akshabirya Jatraha Sthiraya Rangayish Tushchuvamsas Tonavir Vishema Devahitam Yadayohu. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual, hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting, and may we, while living a life which is beneficial to ourselves and all other beings, worship the Lord of the Mother of the universe with healthy minds and bodies. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om. Japa Hari Om Tat Sat.